Are people online? Hello, everyone. Uh, Welcome to the seminar. We have a great triple feature today. I'm going to start off the festivities by introducing Abby Luna. Abby is from Texas. I didn't need to tell you that, but even if you had 30 seconds of talking to her, you probably know that she's from Texas. By the way, I heard this before I saw you talk. So I'm going to say it. Abby got a BS in environmental science with honors from Oregon State University, where she worked on a really cool project about the accessibility of state birds to state residents. And that manuscript is currently in review in biological conservation, and hopefully it'll come out soon. It's a really, really cool paper. I really urge you to read it when it does come out. She did all her undergrad and wrote this really cool paper all before she was of age of drinking. Little does cow folks watering hole know that someday it'll have the honor of being immortalized in Abby's memoirs. After college, Abby worked with the BLM in Burns, Oregon, where she did everything from wildlife biology fieldwork in remote wilderness to learning the art of throwing bales of hay while standing in the bed of a moving pickup while avoiding falling over and getting Mufasa'd by a hungry horde of Mustangs. The balancing part must have been relatively easy though, since Abby is an accomplished gymnast. Abby has been a wonderful lab member. She is super resilient. She had an initial project that didn't quite work out. It was all about Florida scrub jay cognition. But she bounced right back. And what you're seeing here is a project that she only started at the end of May. She hopes to get into animal cognition research again for her graduate degrees. We'll miss her dearly and wish her all the best. Abby, the floor is yours.
Good. So nice. Okay, so yeah, I'm gonna. Can I hit the X on this? I'm just gonna move it. Okay, I just need to see my notes. We're good. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I'm Abby, like you just heard. And if you guys read Laura's email and you heard Sahas's talk, you know that we're going to talk about the effects of density dependence on demography in Florida scrub jays. But we're also going to talk about a little bit more than that because we're going to kind of broadly go over my journey here at Archbold, and this is Abby's edition of the intern talk. So we're going to talk about my whole journey here, and to do that, we're going to go back in time a little bit, recap some things. So, like Sahas said, I am from Texas, and you guys probably all know that because you've talked to me for literally more than 30 seconds. And I love Texas. I grew up there, and that's where I learned to love being outside. It's where I learned to love science. But I will admit that after being there for most of my life, I was ready to get out. So when I graduated high school, I flew myself to Oregon State University, which is where I got to do a lot of really cool things. I studied environmental science. I met some of my lifelong friends. I got credit for going on a camping trip. And I started to really fall in love with birds while I was there. I wrote an undergraduate thesis that was talked about that's under review in biological conservation. And then after that, I graduated, like a lot of people do. And I went across the other side of the Cascades, and I worked for the Bureau of Land Management. While I was working for the BLM, I looked at a lot of grass and a lot of cows. I fed horses, and I just kind of continued to fall in love with birds. I met a couple of retired Forest Service birders who taught me pretty much everything that I know. And I was lucky enough to get a job here at Archbold. So I moved myself all the way across the country again. And I came to Archbold and I met a scrub jay. And they're so cool. And I fell in love with them. And I learned how to search for their nests. And I started finding nests. And I found the first nest of the season this year. And then I did that for a long time. Found more nests, looked at scrub jay babies. And it was about this time when Sahas and Tori said to me, Abby, you really need to start thinking about this intern project. What are you interested in? So I thought about it, and I thought about my experiences on the West Coast and my experiences here. And I thought there's somebody that I need to introduce you guys to. So over here on the left, we have a Florida scrub jay, but on the right, it's not quite right. That's actually a California scrub jay. Look very similar, closely related species. And I would see these guys all the time when I was back in Oregon. And one thing that I noticed that was different is California scrub jays do really well in suburban and urban environments. They live in backyards, they were on campus. But Florida scrub jays don't. Florida scrub jays really need true scrub and really need healthy scrub habitat. So I wondered why they were not doing so well in urban and suburban environments. And then I met Kelsey McCune, who is a collaborator here at Archbold, and she's done research on the West Coast, and she studies avian cognition. And she was like, Abby, I studied California scrub jays, and I have this puzzle box that I made, and I tested them on it, and I have all this data, and I never did anything with it. And I was like, oh my gosh, Kelsey, can I take your puzzle box and test our scrub jays? And she's like, that sounds super cool. So I got this puzzle box from her, as you can see, and it consists of 4 different doors that have little clear, that are clear. And the birds have to figure out how to open each of the doors to get to the tasty peanuts inside. So in order to do this project, I had to first habituate the birds. So they had to learn not to be afraid of the box and learn that there were peanuts in the box. I wanted 15 to 20 birds in my study, and each bird needed 6 trials, and each trial was going to be 2 hours long. So in order to get this done, I needed to do 2 trials a day for 6 days a week for 3 months straight, which is a lot of work, especially in a 6-month internship when I was already in month 2. And this was only going to work out if everything went absolutely 100% correct. So what did I do? First, I tried my darndest. Here you'll see a video of one of the scrub jays learning to habituate to the box. There's a bunch of peanuts in there that he's going to grab and fly off with. The breeder male from our nub group. This video is about the total sum time that I had this bird at this box. He basically took the peanuts and flew away and never showed back up again. So things didn't work out. I failed. And then I cried, and then I complained a little bit, and then I cried some more, and then I gave up and I found a new project. And that's how we got to the effects of density dependence on demography in Florida scrub jays. So thanks to Archbold's long-term data set, I was able to find a different project that interested me and a project that wouldn't require me to sacrifice my body or my sanity. So to understand density dependence, first we need to understand what is density. And density is defined as the number of individuals, in our case birds, in a single unit area. So right now there's probably about 30, 40 people in the size of this room. That's the density of this room. But for Florida scrub jays, it can also be measured in number of groups, since they're cooperatively breeding and they live together in family groups in one territory all year long. Sometimes we just go based on number of groups. And then we also want to know what is demography, which is defined as the change in population over time, and it can be measured with different vital rates such as birth rates, death rates, and reproduction. And the combination of these 2 things is something that's really well studied in ecology. Density dependent factors are pretty well known. A density dependent factor would be something like if there were suddenly 400 people in this room, it would start to get really hot, right? So as the density of this room increases, you're going to see changes in other factors. And it has been studied in Florida scrub jays. Summers et al. Paper found that there were density dependent effects on adults in the population, but there hasn't been studies on breeding success or reproduction. So that's what we wanted to look at. We wanted to find out how these vital rates respond to increasing density in our Florida scrub jay population here at Archbold. So in order to do that, we used a generalized linear mixed model, or GLMM, which is a fancy term for bringing together our response variable, which is vital rates. In this case, we're looking at the frequency at which nests failed. So as the scrub jay builds a nest, they put a bunch of sticks together, they get palmetto fibers, and they fiber the nest. So that's like stage 1. Then they lay eggs. Hopefully those eggs hatch, and hopefully those hatchlings turn into fledglings, which then become independent birds. So also in this case, frequency is a ratio at which these things failed. So if there were 10 nests that had eggs, but only 5 nests that hatched, then 50% of nests failed at the egg stage. If that makes sense. Then our GLMM brought together our explanatory variable, which was density. Again, we chose to measure it in 2 ways, number of groups and number of individuals in an area. And then we wanted to control for some things that we know affect breeding success in scrub jays, thanks to prior studies. That would be helpers at the nest, winter acorn crop, and the number of years since a fire has happened. And then finally, we accounted for some randomness using territories or random effect. And we expected to see a negative association between vital rates as density increased, no matter which way we measured density. But that's not what we found. So this graph here is showing density measured as number of groups on the x-axis and then a predicted number of birds at these different stages here. So we saw significant increases in the number of nests made, as well as significant increases in fledglings, independents, and yearlings. But when we looked at density as the number of individuals, which that axis label is wrong, sorry. I made this graph this morning. We did see significant number of increase in nests made, but there was no effect on fledglings, yearlings, and independents. And it's not really shown here, but the fledglings is like right under the independents. It's there. So what does that mean? I think basically what we found is that it matters how you measure density, and you can't just say the number of birds in an area and number of groups are the same thing. So something to consider going forward. The other thing that we found is some results with fire. So looking at this graph, you might think that this is a negative slope, which is true, but it's actually a good response. It's something positive. Thanks to Kevin Main and Viv and Lupe and everybody who's worked on fire management here at Archbold, we have been able to slowly decrease the average time since fire across the whole station. Average time since fire in this case was calculated. We have data for every single square unit on the station and when that unit was burned. So I was able to take that data and do a weighted average within each territory. So if half the territory burned last year and half the territory burned 10 years ago, the territory on average burned 5 years ago. So I found that weighted average for every territory and then found a mean for each year across the whole station. And we can see that that mean is going down, which means that we are having a shorter and shorter fire interval. And that is shown to directly improve the number of scrub jay groups that an area can support. Again, negative slope, good result. So we're seeing that as time since fire decreases, the number of groups that an area can support increases, which means that here at Archbold, through our fire management, we are actively improving habitat for scrub jays, which is great. So what did I learn through this project? I learned that scale matters and how we measure density matters. As land managers and managers for Florida scrub jays, we need to be able to agree on a measure of density because we need to be able to properly survey and maintain healthy scrub jay populations. I also learned that proper fire management is really important, and it can help to continue increasing the carrying capacity for habitats of Florida scrub jays. But as we think about this, I just want to put a caveat in that we are still seeing increase in effort from the scrub jays. There are more nests being made no matter how we measure density. So we don't know what the limit is for how much longer we can keep improving habitat. We don't know what the effects on breeder health or breeder survival might be. This might be really negatively impacting our adult birds. So we can't just say that we have this positive increase forever and ever. It's probably not true. And finally, I learned that science is hard and it's okay for things not to work out, but it's important to remember to use your resources and keep trying until you find something that sticks. So thank you to all of these people and everyone for being here today. And now, any questions?
So Todd Jones just submitted a long-term report on fire and scrub jays at Avon Park Airport. I know perhaps have seen that before. And really the length of time since fire or the frequency that you had on the slope there is really driving juvenile survival. Mm-hmm. And I think it would be extremely useful for you to, if you haven't had a chance to look at that report yet, and dig into it and see whether you've got some of the same, so whether that was the one factor, nothing else. Everything else was not really being affected, except juvenile survival. And you may have enough data in there to see whether you're seeing the same thing here.
Yeah, I think that would be great to add and build onto these results for sure. Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts about why the puzzle box didn't work for these jays and it did for the California?
Yeah, there were a couple constraints like with how I was doing it versus how Kelsey had done it. She was a PhD student at the time. This was her whole job to be able to test these jays. So she was able to go out first thing in the morning with them. I obviously have a job here at Archbold, and my job is to find scrub jay nests. So a lot of my trials had to happen in the afternoons, and it was hotter and the birds were not as eager to come back to the box. It is also entirely possible that our birds are dumb, but we don't know, so. Yes.
So Kelsey's watching, and I just wanted to read this comment. Very cool results, Abby, and so important to learn how and when to give up and pivot to more productive questions.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.